Hello and welcome to Hysteria. I'm Erin Ryan.
And I'm Alyssa Mastromonaco.
Alyssa, why are the germs so bad? No.
They're bionic now. The germs are bionic.
So bad. I've got a turbo cold, and it's not COVID, because I've tested 3 times during the course of my sickness. And I am going on a week plus of feeling like I'm going to die. When does it end? Is this just my life?
It's a momentary thing, Erin. We're all going to be great soon. This is me being glass half full, though I don't really believe it, because if you'll recall several weeks ago, my petty was people who were like, "Are you sick again?" Because I too I have caught everything that has gone around.
It is a nightmare, and I pray that soon my body runs out of snot. I had no idea that there was this much space inside of my face and chest, and that's gross.
I wish I were there to steam you like I steam my cat Midge.
Ew. Alyssa, let's get started with news. We're going to do something a little bit different today. Yeah, so today, like squares of butter into a croissant dough, we are folding our interview into our news segment for a couple of reasons. Have you ever done that? I can't do that. Fold the butter.
I'm not a good laminator.
I can't do it, but we're going to do it in our news segment this week because we often cover similar stories to our guest today. And in fact, her work makes it easier for us to do our work. And second, because she is simply a good hang. So we figured let's just combine it into one segment and let's meet her. Today's guest is Jessica Valenti. You may know her from her current project, the Substack Abortion Every Day, where she writes about the current state of abortion in the U.S. OGs might know her as the founder of the blog Feministing and author of 5 books, including Full Frontal Feminism and The Purity Myth. Jessica Valenti, welcome to Hysteria.
Thank you for having me.
We are so glad you're here. Can you tell us a little bit about your Substack project, Abortion Every Day? Like, what gave you the idea, whatsoever gave you the idea to write about abortion every day? And how's it going?
I mean, it's going poorly, like for anyone who is writing about abortion right now, right? Like it's a difficult beat. But honestly, it sort of happened organically because, as you know, there's so much happening with abortion. There's so much going on every single day. That after Roe was overturned and I started, I already had an existing Substack and I started writing about what was going on. I realized, I'm writing multiple things a day. I'm just gonna formalize this and call it a thing. But really the hope, and I think we're there, was to create something that made people feel not so overwhelmed, right? Like that's the hard thing about everything that's going on with abortion rights. One of the many hard things is that we're being so inundated with bad news, bad bills, horror stories. And really that's part of the Republican strategy is to just completely overwhelm us. And they're hoping that overwhelm will sort of freeze us into inaction. And so the hope is that by providing a daily email roundup of what's going on, not just politically, but, culturally, that folks will feel a little bit more in control and on top of what often feels like an uncontrollable situation.
Now, Jessica, I use your Instagram and your Substack as my nightly read. And you cover so much of what really isn't found anyplace else. But let's start off with something that actually is being covered. Can you tell us everything that's happening in Texas right now with the lawsuit that is being brought by women who are pregnant and feel the state of Texas has fucked them over?
This is great. I mean, it's horrible, but it's great. So 5 women from Texas who were denied vital health care despite being allowed it, like air quotes, allowed it under Texas law. They are suing them, saying that they were denied this care, even though their health and lives were at risk, even though their pregnancies had fatal abnormalities. One of the stories, a woman ended up with sepsis, was literally told, like, you cannot come back. We cannot help you unless you're close to death. And guess what? She got very close to death. She ended up in the ICU with sepsis. Just horror story after horror story. And so they are coming forward and they've brought this lawsuit, and their hope is they're not trying to rescind the law. They want to amend the law so that the exception is better worded. But I think really this is about, raising people's consciousness about what is happening and the real life impact that this has on people. In the lawsuit, there's a sentence that I've been thinking about, and it says something along the lines of, these women and women across the country have been denied dignified care, right? It's the dignity of it. And I think that has really been something that's stuck with me as I've been doing this newsletter. Yeah, we haven't seen, there's been no reported deaths yet, though I am 100% confident that there have been deaths. And so a lot of the stories we're seeing are women who have suffered, right? And the anti-choice response to that I've seen has been, well, look, the laws are working. They're alive. They're okay. Right. They're alive. And so the laws are fine. No talk about the suffering that they had to go through, the lack of dignified care. And if our standard for care for women is like, well, you're alive, aren't you? I think we're in a pretty bad fucking place.
Speaking of dignity, Florida, a place currently with very, very little dignity. Florida's Republican-led legislature on Tuesday, just a couple days ago, filed bills that would ban abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy, which we all know most people don't know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. But they're trying to, thread a Floridian needle and offer exemptions for victims of rape and incest. Here's the dignity part. If they can provide official proof of the crime. Jessica, what the fuck does that even mean?
Yeah, it's just, no rape and incest exceptions are real. So let's be clear on that from the get-go. These are not things that people are actually able to make use of, in large part because of language like that, right? And so in addition to saying that you have to get abortion care before 15 weeks, which again is a hurdle that is a very difficult one for rape and incest victims to cross because so many of them are in denial, because so many of them are minors. So they have that one hurdle, and then they have this other hurdle that's you need to bring some sort of proofs, like a court document, a police report to prove that you've been attacked. And anyone who knows anything knows that the vast majority of victims will never, ever go to police or report their attacks because of everything that happens when they do, and because of the, inequity in the criminal justice system. And so what this law is saying is you don't get health care if you have been raped, unless you're willing to put yourself through the trauma of reporting it. And most people won't.
I guess just get a receipt the next time you get raped so that you can bring it to the doctor.
Well, and that's what I thought was so dodgy about the way they said it. Proof of a crime, is that a report or a conviction? Because that doesn't work.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And different, right? Prosecutors will argue different things, and they have kept it very vague for a reason. And they also had very vague language in terms of, penalties for abortion. It's anyone who provides or actively participates in an abortion. So what does actively participate in mean? I have to assume the person who's getting the abortion has actively participated. Does the person who drove them, actively participate? What about someone who lent them money for the procedure? Are they actively participating? That language is kept incredibly deliberately vague so that whatever, radical district attorney decides that they want to bring charges, they can interpret that how they would like to.
And, another thing, one of the women, I think, in Texas who is behind the lawsuit, her water broke too early for her fetus to be viable. And in that case, would the fetus itself be an active participant in the abortion, since the fetus was sort of yeeted itself? It was okay. But that's, I know I'm being glib right now, but that is the way a lot of miscarriages work. It's something happens, there's a fetal issue, or there's some sort of genetic thing, and the fetus or the pregnancy itself is just nope, not this time. And so what? Yeah. Well, it's so. It's like people trying to write laws who couldn't even pass biology. It's like they're writing fanfic about what pregnancy is,
It really, really is. I wrote a column a few months ago about like the kind of people who are writing these laws and enforcing them. And it's like the dumbest, most obnoxious guy you knew in high school. Like the worst, the literal worst person you knew. That is who is writing these laws. That is who is arresting people, right? Like it's, so infuriating.
And, there's a part of me that thinks Alyssa mentioned the 6-week cutoff, and a lot of states are trying to do a 6-week cutoff. And I feel like in these cases, lawmakers are benefiting from the fact that language around pregnancy in like gynecology is very confusing. Like the fetus is not 6 weeks old when you are 6 weeks pregnant. Do you think that gynecologists should get together and like rejigger the way that they describe pregnancy? Like, would that help with the public perception of the way that abortion works and the way that pregnancy works? Because like there is no 1 week pregnant. You cannot take a pregnancy test when you are 1 week pregnant because you haven't even ovulated yet. It's like...
Right. It's too complicated for them. They will never, like, whatever threshold they are at now, they'll find a way to move it. They'll find a way to change it. And like whenever you present them with the reality of what happens during pregnancy, they literally cannot process it. Or they just say you're lying. Like, look at what happened when those pictures of early pregnancy, early abortion went viral, right? They lost their minds. I got messages, you photoshopped the fetus out of that picture. You like removed it before you put like just the most wild shit because they truly have no sense of what pregnancy is actually like or what pregnancy actually looks like. And when confronted with the truth of it, it's like their minds explode.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. How do you feel about the Walgreens news? Like they're only allowing abortion medication to be dispensed from their pharmacies where it is legally permissible. What's the latest with that?
But they're not, right? Like so these 28 state AGs sent them threatening letters. First, they got back to the Kansas Attorney General and said, we're not going to dispense or ship anything to Kansas where abortion is legal. And then they came out and, they're basically doing whatever these Republican state AGs want. But because of the public backlash to that, which is understandable, yesterday they released a very, shadily worded statement saying, we're just going to follow the law and we're going to dispense it where it's legal. But that is something that's very in contrast to what they are telling these state attorney generals. So I have to assume that what they're saying is if the state attorney general says it's illegal, even if the law says that it's legal, we're going to go with the state attorney general, right? Like, so they're being very fishy about the way they're saying it, trying to thread this needle of making people happy, doing damage control. But obviously, they've caved. And I think that is just going to be the case everywhere. And so now we have to wait to see what happens with CVS and more independent pharmacies. But the anti-choice groups and anti-choice activists have basically been parking themselves outside of various pharmacies as a way to threaten and intimidate in the same way that they do at abortion clinics, in the hope that pharmacists are just going to say, you know what, like this is not worth it.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, Walgreens did a little bit of fucking around and finding out though, right? Because in California, like Governor Newsom has announced that, okay, we're not going to do any business with you. Do you think that California's, I mean, I know that, neither of us are in Gavin Newsom's office or in his head or anything like that, but do you think that California's actions are part of what spurred Walgreens to kind of like freak out and be like, oh, no, we're still doing it?
I think so, yes. And I think just the public outrage as well. I mean, what Walgreens forgot and what a lot of people forget is that the vast majority of American people want abortion to be legal. And they certainly don't want their pharmacies telling them that they can't have access to legal medication. And so I think it was a combination of, yes, California, but also I feel quite confident that they are hearing from a lot of customers as well.
Mm-hmm. You know what? I learned an interesting factoid this morning, and that is that counties that voted for Joe Biden in 2020 account for around 70% of the GDP.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah. And so there's something to me that's like, I feel as though Newsom, even if what he's doing is sort of political theater, is like a really good example because California is like 15% of this country's economy. Like like Washington, Oregon, like states with big ports, New York, they're like blue states have a ton of economic heft. And I feel as though they're not really throwing their weight around as much as they could. How do you feel about that, Jessica?
100%. With Newsom, he's been doing a ton of terrific stuff. And at this point, I don't give a shit if it's political theater because he is doing something and it is having an impact. And like, that is what we need. And that's what we want to see. Like, I want to see politicians being proactive on the offense on this because we have the public support, we have the votes, and people need to stop acting as if we don't, as if this like is something that Americans are truly equally, split on or polarized on when they're really not.
Here in New York, I feel like Governor Hochul could be doing so much more and really sort of doing a little bit more Newsoming in her own right. And we're really not.
We're not. I don't hear anything about it. Right? Like,
no,
I feel
like
like
nothing.
I hear something about California and abortion every single day. I don't hear that in New York. And it's too bad. Like, we have the ability to. Obviously, a lot of people are traveling to New York for abortion care. And so I would love to hear more about what are we going to do for them? How are we going to protect them? How are we going to protect providers? What kind of money are we going to put forward? Are we going to start putting billboards in anti-choice states telling people how to get to New York for care? We should.
Well, and not only that, but as to Erin's point about the counties that went for Biden participating so greatly in our national wealth, whatever that might be, so much of the aid goes to states like Mitch McConnell's state. And so I just feel like our states really could be just doubling down a little bit more. What is happening in Iowa? They are really, the fuckery is widespread.
Which thing in Iowa? The websites? There's
websites.
There's so much happening.
Jessica, tell us everything that's happening in Iowa. This is our listeners. We're so lucky because our listeners are from all over. And sometimes this news is just too much to keep up with. So
it is a lot. So there's an Iowa bill that is very similar actually to a Texas bill that is seeking to ban pro-choice websites in the state. They specify that they want them banned at libraries, schools, like high schools, universities, but really it's everywhere. And they want to give citizens the right to sue internet service providers who don't block those websites in the state. And so again, that's another thing that like Texas is doing. They're taking a page out of Texas's book. It is so wild. In Texas, in the Texas bill, they actually specifically name some of the websites that they want banned. Websites like Aid Access and Hey Jane, any place that provides abortion medication for shipping or information about abortion medication. There's a line in the Iowa bill that says it's not just, abortion or you're, selling abortion. Anyone who enables the aiding and abetting of abortion. So it's like, they're like, how much can we stretch this out to include everyone so that people are scared out of their minds and, and won't get the care that they need.
It's almost like they don't understand that women have been having abortions for the entirety of human history. And they weren't pharmaceutical or surgical in a lot of cases, but like, they've been having abortions. It's not like every time somebody became pregnant prior to like Margaret Sanger that everyone was like, whoops, well, guess I'm just going to have this. It's kind of wild that they think banning the internet will prevent it, like a practice that's as old as civilization itself.
Right. Listen, I think they know it's just about making it more dangerous, making it more difficult, making it harder, and terrorizing women along the way, because that's all this is doing, right? Is like, you're just terrorizing the women who are going to get that care no matter what, but you're making them terrified in the meantime. You're making them paranoid. You're making them not tell anyone in their life because they're afraid that the people in their life are going to turn them in, which is, what happens in places like Texas. And so you're essentially creating the situation where women who are already scared and dealing with a really stressful situation are now going to be even more frightened and also alone and lack that support.
One of the other things in Iowa that I thought, it's like, these are the things that I find the most frustrating, I guess, maybe. I mean, it's all frustrating, but the the amount of sort of subterfuge they're going to confuse people. So in the governor's new healthcare legislation, she is spending like $1.5 million to open up new pregnancy resource centers, which sounds like a good thing, but the whole point of that is to counsel against abortion.
Yeah, they're all like across all of those anti-choice states. They are increasing funding for anti-abortion centers. I'm trying very hard to start calling them anti-abortion centers rather than crisis pregnancy centers.
Right.
But they're putting a lot of stock in these places that are not just anti-abortion, lie to women, right? Conceal information about their health, but are completely inept, right? Like there was a whistleblower in Kentucky who came forward. She was a volunteer nurse at an anti-abortion center, and they were using expired disinfectant, like for the transvaginal ultrasound. Yeah. And they were using lubricant for the ultrasound wand that was meant to go outside on the body. And they were using that for internal. Yeah. And she went to the Kentucky medical board, the nursing board, and they didn't do anything. There was no consequences because these places are so lightly regulated, barely regulated at all, that they can essentially do anything they want. And when you look at the numbers, they're like giving out like essentially what amounts to like a package of diapers per person who comes in. They are not like helping women in any way. All of that money goes towards salaries and like promotional campaigns to get the word out. Like they're not helping anyone.
Aren't they also trying to like give women a hard sell on putting their babies up for adoption? Like they don't want these. They don't want. I feel like, and you know, this is maybe just me being paranoid, but I feel like they don't really want poor women to be mothers. They want them to give birth, but they don't want them to be allowed to be mothers. I think they want their children to be given up for adoption for the millions of evangelical couples that are waiting to adopt children who like.
100%. 100%. And I think you would probably find that like a lot of those centers have connections to those like Christian adoption centers, and they have relationships, you know, absolutely.
Okay. Well, we don't want to take too much more of your time, but like, just bringing it back to your Substack, is it hard to write about this constantly? And like, what brings you hope writing about this every single day? What brings you hope and what keeps you going?
I think honestly, this is part of the reason I'm on TikTok and I like TikTok is because seeing all of like the younger feminists being so outraged and doing their thing, like that is what makes me feel like we're going to be okay. Because again, like public support is on our side. And seeing women and young women in particular and young feminists be so pissed off and be so furious, like their anger and outrage absolutely is fueling me.
What would happen if you ran out of material? Like, what would you do if suddenly like, like, what would you do?
I'd be so happy. I would take like the world's biggest, take a huge nap, pop an Ambien, and see you in like 3 days.
Amazing. Jessica Valenti, where can our listeners find you? We'll put a link to your Substack in our show notes, but where else can they connect?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram and all of the places, and I'm on TikTok under anti-killjoy, which is fun. I enjoy it there. So yeah, all of the places. But yeah, the best place to find me is definitely at jessica.substack.com.
Amazing. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us. Come back again sometime. I'm sure there'll be more for us to talk about.